Today's class is called, we're calling it Our Bounded Choices. And I want to set it up for you. If you recall, a couple of weeks ago, we gave a talk. I spoke about human behavior and the causes of human behavior, and was looking at just the ways in which we just kind of bifurcate the causes into those that are inside of us, the choices we make, the free will, our personal decisions, all of the things that come from within me, the things that happen here and that lead me to make one choice or another. And then on the other side are the causes of my behavior or our behavior that are factors and forces outside of our control. So things like where I grew up and who my parents were and how much money we had, and people I meet along the way, and what my gender, my sex, my race, my culture, all of these things. So things that shape my life and shape my decisions, and so often in ways that I don't see. I don't have any idea, and I don't really understand. And if you remember, I got to the place where I was saying that, in fact, causes of human behavior are a blending of the two. It's always a blending of the two. My personal choices that I'm making and factors and forces outside of my control that I did not choose. So with that in mind, that is the frame within which we're going to have class today. And we have a really special class, and we have two special guests who are very special to me. And the first guest, and they're going to talk about this issue of choice and chance, or free will and determinism, the ways in which these things operate in our lives, leading us to behave in certain ways. And so Laurie is back, my wife, Laurie Mulvey, Dr. Laurie Mulvey, who is the director of World and Conversation. She was here earlier in the semester when we talked about beauty. And and Laurie is probably, interesting story, I don't think I said this, but earlier when I introduced her, but Laurie is the person who taught me the core idea in sociology, and which was kind of interesting because she had never, when I met her, we were dating at the time, and she had never taken a sociology class, and she was reading a textbook that I was using in a sociology class that I had used several times because I had taught sociology at that point in time, probably 4 different classes. And she said, wow, this is really interesting. I said, what's interesting? And then she explained it to me. And it was the first time that a light bulb went off in my mind, saying, oh my God, that really is the core idea in sociology. And it's linked to what we're talking about today. And so I have had the privilege of being with Laurie for how long? 35 years? Yeah, I'm doing the math. 35 years maybe? A long time. And really, it's always special to have her in class because she just has so much insight and wisdom. And she's also awesome at asking questions, which is she is the brainchild behind World and Conversation, which is all built on asking really good questions. And our other special guest is the owner of this really cool dog, Fred, and it's Irvin Moore. And Irvin Moore and Laurie met probably about 15 years ago, and then I met Irvin through Laurie, and Laurie met Irvin when she started taking students over to Rockview Prison. And we were having dialogues and conversations with incarcerated lifers at Rockview. And at Rockview, a lifer is somebody in Pennsylvania. A lifer is someone who has a life sentence, meaning that they're in prison for life and they're never going to get out. Prison is a place where they're going to die. That's what a life sentence means in Rockview Prison, or in Pennsylvania. Irvin is out, which is a story in itself, but we will not go there in this. Maybe they will get to that. And Laurie met Irvin, and I will never forget the first night she came home and said, you know, I met this guy who's, I don't know how to describe him, but this really, really special person. And she later would talk about her time with so many of these folks, these men who were in the Lifers program over at Rockview, and taking students over there and having conversations. And she would say, I feel like when I go in there and I talk to these men, I feel as though I am going to some spiritual ceremony. I'm going to church or synagogue or the mosque or somewhere. I'm going to a temple. It's a holy experience. And then I had the opportunity to go on numerous occasions, and I came back saying the same thing. And what happens is, so many of us don't ever have that opportunity to have a real, honest, thoughtful, and insightful conversation with somebody who has been incarcerated, and almost nobody ever has the opportunity to hear from someone who spent 52 years behind bars, and who Laurie would refer, and I would refer to an experience, and an exchange, and a friendship with this person as one built on spiritual atonement and holiness. And that should make your ears go like, what? What is this? And I feel, for me, it's an honor to have the two of you here, and it's particularly an honor to have Fred here, but it really is an honor to have the two of you, and have you and Irvin, to have you being in this place. You are now a Penn State employee, to be in this place where you can share your story with students in this class who do not have an opportunity to hear a story such as yours. So with that in mind, I'm going to step out of the way, and I'm going to give it to you all, right? Yeah.
Unless you want to chair.
Hey, and at some point, the only thing that I ask, at some point I would like you to just say something about this guy and why he's always right next to you wherever you go. Yeah,
Okay.
That would be really nice. So thank you to the two of you.
Hi, everyone. I'm honored to be here with my dear friend Irvin Moore. 1 year ago, and a couple days. Hang on one second, y'all. There you go. 1 year ago and a few days, Irvin was released from Rockview Prison after 52 years. So every moment since then has been a sacred moment. And so you really all do have an opportunity today that feels at that level to us. So Irvin's going to do most of the talking, but and he's good at talking. And some of you may have already heard him around campus. He's now part of the Restorative Justice Initiative on campus, which is something for you all to get interested in once you're done with this talk and you realize how many things there are to do in this world of justice. But Irvin, why don't you just start before we sort of get into, we really want to talk about Irvin's life and how he got to 52 years spent not just at Rockview, but in prison. Just say something about being here in this moment at Penn State, a year after your release.
Well, I'm looking around and looking at all these faces, looking at the students, looking at a lot of faces that I've met already, a lot of people that I've talked to thus far. And I'm overjoyed. I'm overjoyed. Every day that I've been home, and this is my home, I've been thankful. I've been very, very conscious of the blessings in my life. I don't want to deviate too far from where we're going with this, but I want every one of you to know that you are blessed. Of course you're blessed by being here today listening to me. Of course, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you're blessed being alive at this time, at this moment in history. So much potential, so many choices that you're going to have to make. So many decisions you're going to have to make. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Laurie, and we'll see where she takes it from here.
Well, I want to just start out with you saying something about your life, your growing up, where you grew up, your family.
Okay.
Just give us that.
Okay. Now, you heard Sam, you heard Dr. Richards say I was in prison for 52 years. It's incredulous. That's unbelievable. I mean, as good as I look. How could I have been in prison for 52 years? It's almost impossible.
Irvin says he was preserving himself in prison.
Well, I didn't say I was preserving myself. The mere fact I was there was preservation enough, to an extent. I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I don't smoke. And I'm not going to say what my sex life is like, but it's probably not like yours. You know, and also I have Fred. Fred keeps me. A person when I first came in here, may I? A person asked me what kind of service dog is Fred? He's a physical service dog because he's big enough to do anything that a person that needs a physical service dog for can do. He's an emotional service dog because I love him, and he loves me, and that's so obvious, so obvious.
There he is. On the street.
Oh, and he is a psychological service dog because he keeps me grounded, and vice versa. When I first got Fred, who came from an abusive situation, which is about 7 years ago or so, I was still in Rockview Prison. I was part of a canine handlers program, and we taught dogs to become service dogs. And the dogs were usually rescue dogs that came from deplorable conditions. I mean, horrendous kinds of circumstances. And Fred, if I get up and walk over there, he will get up and walk over there. Where I go, Fred would go, and we love each other. One other thing I want to say about Fred, to give you a heads up. 2 months ago, January 26th, Fred was diagnosed with bone cancer. In his left forelimb. And when we talked to the technician that was there, he gave me two options. The first was amputation. Fred was almost 170 pounds, 150 pounds at least, with rheumatoid arthritis in at least 2 or 3 of his limbs. How could I cut one of his limbs off? How could I do that?
What's he looking for?
He
doesn't want us to talk about this, I think.
But it is what it is. We know. Mm-hmm. And the second option was to put him down. That was it. To cut his leg off or to put him down. I said, what about pain management? Laurie even suggested, well, couldn't we just do something to manage his pain? Then he agreed. He said, oh, that is right. We could do that. So I said, we can manage his pain so he's not in excruciating pain. And when Fred feels that he's ready to go, he will let us know, one way or another. And right now, as you can see, look at this. He is not ready to go. He is eating a lot. He's drinking his water. When he wants to go out, he'll let me know. When I go out and leave him for any appreciable amount of times, when I come back, he's like a 6-month-old puppy, and he's jumping around. And even though his limb is bothering him, he shows that, look, Daddy, where have you been? I'm glad you're back. I'm so glad you're back. And he loves us human beings, doesn't he? Indeed. Those of you who have met Fred already know he loves us.
And I do want to attest to, before we get back to you, Irvin, that he really has been a steady presence for Irvin through so many transitions and changes. Irvin is amazingly resilient, but imagine being, well, you can't, but imagine being in prison for 52 years and coming out and going to Walmart, because that's what we did. There's just one thing after another, getting a cell phone, a computer, your own apartment, going to the store, every single thing. And Fred has been that grounding for Irvin, which is a whole other conversation really about re-entry and what does one need to re-enter after being in prison. And that's a whole other thing that a Restorative Justice Initiative is involved in. So the other thing I want to say is that Freddie, when Irvin's sentence was commuted by the governor, that is how he was released.
Indeed.
Freddie was also, his sentence was also commuted by the governor, and that's how he got to go home with Irvin. So he's a very famous four-legged. So let's go back to you, Irvin.
Indeed.
So let's give us a sense of how you grew up, because we all really want to know, how does someone wind up in prison, number one, and then for 52 years, number two. And we're not looking for causal answers, but we're just looking to learn about
Indeed.
cause
Indeed.
and effect, choice and chance.
Well, I want to take this chronologically. I was born, amazingly, in 1946. So I am 75 years old. I was born in North Philadelphia, a section of Philadelphia that, at that time, Philadelphia was pretty much a segregated city. So I was born and raised around a lot of African-American men and women. My mother and father were workers, hard workers. I had an elder sister that took care of my brothers and I. One thing that I didn't say last time I was here was that there was a period in my life when I did not speak. When I did not speak, I didn't talk. And the reason why I didn't talk is because I stuttered horribly. I couldn't put two words together. I mean, and I'm not doing this as a joke, but I sounded like this. Do you? And people laughed at me. I mean, growing up, we're kids. Kids do that, of course. Kids can be rough. Kids can be mean. And they laughed at me. And I didn't like it. So I did two things. I stopped talking. I stopped talking for about 4 years. And I fought. If you laughed at me, I was going to fight you. So I fought a lot.
How old were you when you were fighting?
Oh, I would say from the time I was 10 till maybe 14, or 9 till I was 13.
And when was the time you weren't speaking?
Doing that's
That's the
period
same
that I'm
time.
talking about.
Okay, so you weren't a little one at that point. You were.
Oh no, I
kid.
was 8, 9 years old.
So can I ask,
Sure.
where did you, or when did you encounter? I'm jumping to another
Go ahead.
piece in your childhood, but it seems relevant to what you're saying. That where people started calling you like the bad kid.
Well, of course, that was this period.
Okay.
I'm fighting every day. People, other boys' mothers would see that, and I became a good fighter. In those days, Philadelphia was known as a town of prize fighters. We had gyms, underground gyms, gyms on the corner, gyms in the basement of the buildings, everywhere. And so when I was maybe 9 years old, I started going to the gym to learn to box.
By yourself? You or did you go with
Well,
friends or?
no, I mean, there were people in the neighborhood that were there, but I went there by myself. And I learned to box. And I learned the ways to defend yourself, ways to be on the offense. And that put me at an advantage in terms of fighting. And it wasn't the best thing.
What did it do to you in school?
Well, see, that's another thing. At the same time that I stopped talking, stopped communicating because I stuttered, I started fighting, I started getting a reputation of being a quote-unquote bad boy. Same thing happened in school, and I just stopped going. I just stopped going to school.
And what age were you at that time?
Everything that I'm talking about
Really?
has happened around when I was 9 years old until I was 14. Everything that I'm describing now was in that same 4-year period. Mm-hmm. And I stopped going to school, and as a result of that, I started going to jail, juvenile institutions. Why? For truancy, for fighting, for being a bad boy. The police in the neighborhood knew me. And their impression of me was, that's one of them hoodlums. It's one of those thugs.
What was the first time you encountered the system?
Oh, well, the system, again, I went to jail in the juvenile institutions for truancy and for fighting and for being, quote unquote, what they call incorrigible, which means I would not do better. Some of the roughest places I've ever been in my life were juvenile institutions. They still are today, which is why I am dead set on making change and with the criminal justice system in and of itself, but with juvenile justice, it's just off the charts.
What makes it different than an adult institution?
Well, first and foremost, children.
How so?
We are vicious. Children can be vicious if they're not monitored, if they're not mentored, if they're not directed, if they're not shown that there are a multiplicity of choices that they can make. A child will react intuitively, and the first thing he does is act out of emotion. But if he had someone that's telling him, oh, wait a minute, you don't have to do it that way. What do you mean I don't have to? What? No, you and sit there and sat down and talk with a child as if he had intelligence. We didn't have that in juvenile institutions. In fact, the strange thing about that place, it was staffed by some of the most sadistic people, adults I've ever met in my life. Sometimes I think that's why they got the jobs, because they could do what they wanted to do with us children. And you talk about fighting and violence and just punishment. But those were 4 years of my life that I will never forget.
Can I ask you a question in
Yes,
the midst of
ma'am.
those 4 years? Mm-hmm. I want you to share the story about your birthday.
Okay.
But I don't know where it fits in the.
I was 13 years old.
Okay,
then,
so it's in this time too.
Still right in that same
Can you tell
period.
that story?
Oh, yes.
Hey, by the way, I want to step in here. I'm
Where
at the
is
top.
Sam?
I'm up here at the top. I just
Oh.
want to just remind the class, like, what you
There he is.
just the importance of this story is how a singular event can really shape a human being's life, right? So,
Yeah, and I hope that you're hearing the choice and chance pieces all throughout this. But yeah, tell us that story about your
How can a
birthday.
single event change the course and the shape and the form and structure of a life? And it can. I was 13 years old and, being a bad boy, but I knew different. I felt who I was. I had known myself for 13 years. And I knew intrinsically I was not a bad boy. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I would rather have fun than to see people cry. Of course, within my neighborhood, all I would hear from people's parents and their older brothers and sisters is, stay away from Irvin, he's a bad boy. Stay away from Irvin, he's a bad boy. And I'd hear this every day. And I'd go back and sit and question myself, am I a bad boy? I said, no. Until I said, wait a minute. If that's what they think I am, that's what I'm going to be. A decision I made based on what was happening outside of myself. A decision I made with my immature, juvenile mind that I knew was wrong, that I knew was not me. There was a friend of mine, his name is Little Charlie, roughest guy I've ever known in my life. We were 12 years old together, 13 years old together, 14. We were in the same juvenile institutions. We were from the same quote-unquote gang. He's the roughest guy, and he was the shortest guy I ever knew at that time. But he was built like a brick outhouse. He was built, and he could fight. He could fight way better than I could. I did not mess with Little Charlie. No one did, but he fought. And he fought, and he fought. And he was the leader of our gang. And if anything happened, he was out front. He was the first one. You know, if there's a crowd coming and there's only two of us, he's the first one up and out in front of them. He and I talk every day now, every day. One of the few people from my era, my generation, that are even still left. And he has a memory like I call him the chronicler, because he remembers stuff I've long ago forgotten. And he makes me laugh. But he's a philosopher also. And he understands, Fred's drinking water, he understands the impact of peer pressure, the environment, and what you're made to believe about yourself at whatever age is most formative in your life. Because he says, Irv, you know I did what I did because I was Little Charlie. I wasn't Charles Young. I was Little Charlie, and everyone expected me to do that. I said, when did you first realize that? He said, then, when we were 12. I was standing in front of the mirror before I go out, and he says, okay, here comes Little Charlie. Little Charlie, get me to come out, you know. Little Charlie, give me. Then he'd walk out. And he played that role. He played that part. When I was 13, I had my first birthday party in my life. It's almost a transition stage in the life of a young African-American boy. You turn 13, now you are a teenager. And I had a little party, had friends over and what have you. Oh, it was so nice. It was so good. And my father gave me an envelope, and with a card in it, and I looked, it was $20. That was 1959. $20 was, look, a hamburger was 25 cents. A Cadillac car was $2,000. I mean, I had $20, and I was 13 years old. I was rich. And I told my little guys, we were on our way to the park. It was about maybe 8, 9, 10 blocks away. I says, everybody come on with me because I'm going to buy everybody something. We're going over to the park. We're going to have fun. We were on our way to the park, got maybe 4 blocks away. When we walked down the street, about maybe 7 or 8 of us, a cop car pulled up. All right, everybody stop. So, against the wall. And remember, I just turned 13. I was 12 yesterday.
And had you already been in the juvenile system at this point?
I had already been in the juvenile system, but that had not impacted my belief of who police officers were. I mean, plus these were adults, these were police officers, and their job was to protect and serve. And I believed that with all my heart. So they put us against the wall and said, where you going? We told them we're going to the park. And they said, okay, let me turn around. And they searched everyone. And he patted me down, and I felt him go in my back pocket. I had a little button on my back pocket where I put my envelope with my money, and I buttoned it back up, and I felt him go in there. He said, turn around. I went in, I saw him do this, and then stuff the envelope back in my pocket, and then they both left and got in the car. I said, all right, get out of here. I took 2 steps, went to my back pocket, pulled my envelope out, opened it, and my $20 was gone. I said, you took my money, give me my money. My father gave me my money. He said, by my language, he said, if you don't get the fuck out of here, nigga, get out, go. Something happened to me. Something happened to my world that day because I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that an adult and a police officer had just robbed me, and I was a kid. But that stuck with me the rest of my life, of course, and it helped shape and flavor decisions that I made from that point on.
Can you share a little bit about your dad and the interaction? I forget if you talked to him about it.
Well, I told the police that I was going to tell my father. And they says, go ahead, tell your father. We don't give a fuck. And I went home. And the first thing I did when my father came home from work, I told him what happened. I said, Dad, the police took my money. He said, where were you at? What were you doing? And I told him everything. I saw a look come over his face. He didn't say, come on, you're going with me. We're going to the police station. We're going to. Just a look come over his face. And he said, all right, go ahead. Go ahead. I said, but what about you? He said, go ahead, boy. And I realized that my father, up until that point, was Superman, as far as I was concerned, to every little boy and girl. Your father's your world. Your mother's your world. And again, something else changed for me that day. And stayed with me for a long, long, long time.
Choice and chance.
Chance. Mm-hmm. And how you respond to them.
So what happens? So now you're 13. You have this experience. You're out of school, or you're going sometimes and not other times. What happens now in the 14?
Well, first thing I want to do is I want to explain how I stopped stuttering and turned into this magnificent orator that
Wait, when I met, it's one of the things that I thought Sam was going to say earlier when he introduced us, is that one of the things that I used to say in describing Irvin to people that I knew that I thought would never meet him, is like, this guy should be narrating documentaries. Little did I know that, that he had this stutter problem when he was a child, because clearly he doesn't have that problem.
I didn't have it any longer. I come from a family of 5 brothers and sisters. There are 4 boys and 1 girl. And my sister is older than I, to the extent that she had children and was married when I was 4 or 5 years old. So I had nieces and nephews almost my age. So there were kids all over the house. I was always a reader. Even though I didn't go to school, I was a voracious reader, and I read everything I could get my hands on. And during that era, this was prior to the explosion of television. Everyone pretty much had a little television, but we listened to the radio. And there was the same shows that you see on television, the same kinds of shows, were being exposed to radio listeners. So the voice was all powerful. The voice was very important. What I would do, because I came from a family of singers, from my grandmother to my youngest niece, we all sang. My brothers and I had our own separate little group, and we sang. We were very good singers. And my brothers made a comment one day about my stuttering that, you never stutter when you sing. I said, wow, that's true. I never stutter when I sing. I went back and I thought about this and thought about it and thought about it, and I said, wait a minute, this has to have something to do with breath control, because when I'm singing, I'm breathing in a certain way, and I know when I'm going lyrics, or I know the storyline of what I'm going to sing and practice. So from that point on, I would get my little brothers, my little nieces, my nephews, line them up. They had no choice. Line them up, and I would get a book. Go to the library or get a book from the one of the encyclopedias or whatever it was, and I would read to them. Today, the 14th of September, 1951, when the man first came home, what he did, and they would listen, and I would tell them stories. It got to the point where they would beg for the stories, and I got better, and I got better, and I stopped stuttering as much, and I was able to read an entire paragraph, then an entire page, then an entire chapter without stuttering. And I incorporated this in my patterns of speech. So I began to speak again at long last. After 4 years of not saying anything, I began to speak to people, and I realized I had so much to say. I had so much to say. Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to change the question that
Of course.
I asked you, and tell us what happened and what was happening around you
Okay.
that got you to a life sentence.
Well, when I left you guys, I was, 13 years old, and this is around 1959, and the next year was 1960, and the 60s was something else. The 60s as an era. Yes, sir. Right before this, but we're going to get to him. We're going to get to Mayor Frank, yeah, because before that he was chief of police. So this is 1960, and there's changes occurring, not just in Philadelphia, but across the nation, across the world. This is an era of what? Explosion, an era of change. This was an era of color, an era of music. This is an era of the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment. This was an era of black power. This was an era of Vietnam, and we saw the war in Vietnam every day on television. This was an era of a cultural change in music, because Bob Dylan and all these brothers started coming out with lyrics that spoke about the social issues in the world. This is an era when young African American and Hispanic students were coming back into our community from universities. And this is the first time we ever had a chance to sit down at their feet and listen to the truth of history. Prior to this, now of course, all of you have been in situations where there have been black studies. Am I correct? African American studies or those kinds of things. That did not exist when I grew up. There's no such thing. African American studies, black studies, we weren't even called black people then. We were still Negroes or colored. But again, I say this was an era of change and so much was happening.
What was happening in your community then?
These young brothers and sisters that were coming back into our community with history, with politics, with economics, with geography, and they were telling us that we come from a line of great people, because we didn't believe this prior to this, and that we cannot accept just anything that anyone tells us, politicians, the power structure, powers that be, that we have a stake in our community. And we began listening to this. Our mothers and fathers, of course, were appalled, or they were scared to death. They had good reason to be. We were young.
What were they afraid of?
What was to come? What was to come? I mean, look, our families had been here for almost 400 years, and they knew what cause and effect is. They knew what to expect. When you take a particular point, a position against authority, they knew what to expect. They were afraid for us.
So can you just say, like, what was a key idea that would make them feel like that
Well,
would be
we
their
were
fear?
talking about being responsible in our own communities. We were talking about holding police officers, like the ones that stole my money, and politicians and council people and legislators. We talk about holding them accountable. And this had not happened in the history of my folk here in this country. And so you're going to generate anger on one side, you're going to generate fear, and you're going to generate a feeling of being so powerful that nothing stopped you. And that's what we felt as kids. We felt so powerful.
So what were you? So I'm picturing you in the midst of this swirl of things that's happening, and you do what at this time?
Well,
What are some of the things you do?
Well, we joined organizations in our communities that were initially set up as co-ops, as organizations that would patrol our own neighborhoods, that would help the old folk, that would do co-op programs that would enable people of low income to just buy food, fresh food, good food. We had educational programs set up in our communities that taught our children history, as we hadn't been taught. And
So can I ask, Irvin, the
yeah.
bad boy, you were joining organizations,
yeah.
helping people in your
Yes,
neighborhood.
yes.
Did that change how people were seeing you at that time?
oh, it did. It did, because for one reason, Philadelphia was also a city of gangs. It was a city of neighborhoods, for one thing, and every neighborhood had a corner, and a corner being, quote, a euphemism for gangs. And so Philadelphia was a neighborhood of gangs. Some of these neighborhoods I had never been in. Even if they were 3 or 4 or 5 blocks away from me, I had never been in their neighborhood. Not unless I had my gang with me, because we had to fight. And this was prior to the era of guns. The proliferation of guns today, but that's another matter. So we fought, as I said, Philadelphia being a prize-fighting town, we fought with our hands. Everyone knew how to fight, knew how to box, and you would always ask for what was called a fair one, which would mean you and him get out there in the middle and get in the circle and slug it out. So when this new change, when this new era, this era of change started happening, we began being taught that member of that gang, those group of guys 4 or 5 or 6 blocks away from you, who you have been fighting for the last 5 years of your life, are your brothers. I said, whoa, what do you mean? He says, in the same situation you're in, economically, politically, socially, they are as disenfranchised as you, they are just as oppressed as you, and there's a bigger force that's doing it to all of y'all. So, join hands with your brother, and that's what we set out to do. And it's the first time in my life I was able to go into neighborhoods I had never been in before and sit down with these brothers, and we began to organize. You're talking about Black Lives Matter today, something on the same line, BLA, Black Liberation Army, Revolutionary Action Movement. This was even before the Panthers. But we started organizing in our communities to protect ourselves, to train ourselves, to educate ourselves.
So where does it go wrong?
Well, cause and effect. While we're doing this, there is an entity watching this saying, oh, no. What's going on? What are the... Again, this is part of the story, part of my history. But what are those niggas doing? What are those spics doing? We can't have that. And that's where Police Commissioner Frank L. Rizzo, who was about 6'3", 6'4", 300-pound, tough guy, Italian boy. And he rose in the ranks. He was what they call a head basher, a head banger. He rose in the ranks with the Philadelphia Police until he became the police commissioner. And he was commissioner with the same kind of attitude. How we approach what's happening in the inner city is we crush them. And that's what they set out to do. Not only that, there was a new element that began to appear in my community that I had never seen before. Drugs. There were no drugs in my community. There were no drugs anywhere in Philadelphia that we knew. Not illicit drugs, of course, aspirin and there was no heroin, there was no cocaine, there was no methamphetamine, there was none of that. That explosion occurred in this same era. And a lot of people who are historians today or sociologists today look back and say that was planned and orchestrated. Because one day it wasn't there and the next day it was everywhere. Now remember, we're young folk, we're being led by some older folk, and we're organizing. We're trying to do things in our community that we felt would uplift our community and benefit everybody that lived there.
Can I just ask you to say,
Yes.
while you're in the midst of that, because I'm
Sure.
trying to picture Irvin, right? So at this point, you're not the bad boy anymore.
Oh,
you are
no,
like
no.
you're volunteering, you're helping, you're organizing. So you're not going to school, or are you?
No.
Okay, but you're involved.
School was in the community. School was no longer at the
Oh,
junior high
right,
school
right, right.
that I was supposed to go to,
Right.
or the high school that I had never went to.
Okay.
And
But now
also-
you have a purpose. You're doing this.
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay.
And we're learning things, and we're implementing ideas and projects, and we're doing this 1 minute. The next minute, there's dope everywhere. With drugs comes money, and with money comes distractions, and people started making decisions based on materialism. So the movement was crushed by that. It was crushed by the power of the authorities, the paramilitary police, and it was also crushed by thousands of young men like me that started going to prison. I don't mean juvenile institution, I mean prison.
So, how did all of those things funnel into your life, the life of Irvin Moore, going from doing all this work to what? What happens next?
You know, if I didn't know better, I would say that God somehow singled me out, to bear the brunt of all of that, because all of the reactionary forces that came into our community, community, seemed to follow me about, seemed to pick me up, seemed to bash me in the head, seemed to lock me up, seemed to send me to prison, I'm saying, wait a minute, what is this? But of course, that's not real. That was happening all over to everyone. And I started going to jail. I started using drugs.
If you look back, what was like the first step you took toward the life that got you into the system?
Again, I was what was called a young revolutionary in my community. I wanted to do what I felt was right to protect and defend and uphold and uplift my community. Whoever lived there, white, black, Hispanic, it made no difference. You lived in that community, we wanted to do something good for you. We wanted to protect you. And the reaction that we got from the powers that be, we didn't expect. We did not expect that the police would come down on us the way they did. We didn't expect that they would begin to create laws that would impact people in my community. Prior to that, I know a lot of you have heard of people like Al Capone and Pretty Boy, Babyface Nelson, and Frank Nitti, and Public Enemy #1, and the mob boys from the 1920s and 30s and 40s. None of them ever served or received the kind of sentences that a young 18-year-old boy would receive today. None of them. Those kinds of draconian laws did not even exist. You have children today 18 years old, 19 years old, 20 years old. They're children. They're serving 40, 60, 80, 100 years. Or, as Sam said initially, in Pennsylvania, a life sentence. You've all heard of someone standing in front of the judge says, I sentence you to a life sentence, and he's 15 years to life or 25 years to life or 30. In Pennsylvania, life is life and has always been life. They don't have to say without parole. If you're sentenced to life, you're sentenced to die in prison. You have a question?
Yeah, I want you to talk about that in a minute, but still, don't just take us to how it is that your case, how you got in the middle of all of this and got a life sentence.
As I said, I wanted to protect my community. I wanted to uphold my community. I wanted to do right. I wanted to do what I thought was the best things to do for my community. And then drugs happened. Heroin specifically happened. And the offshoot of that is money. I saw a young guy, 16 years old, my age, or 17 or what have you, that a week before that we were both in the movement. And now he's driving around in a Cadillac with diamond rings on and clothes that are... And I'm saying, what is this? How did this happen? Where is this coming from? And I became interested in that. I became distracted. Now I wanted some of that. And how do you get that? You sell drugs. Of course, your involvement with drugs quite often would lead you to use drugs, because I'm saying, why do people even use this stuff? Again, decisions. I'm looking at people that said, man, this is the best thing that you could do. And they're, So I tried using drugs. I tried heroin. Another one of the worst mistakes or worst decisions that I could make in my life, because I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't know what that meant, just to use drugs. It's like taking a drink. You don't know what that can lead to. And it led to a life of robbery, thievery, of assault. It led to the point where I put a gun on my hip. And the mere fact that you have proximity to a gun means something's going to happen eventually. And I wound up being involved in a situation where someone lost their life. It makes no difference whether or not it was intentional or not, because it was not intentional. It was not intentional. As I said, years and years and years before that, when they said I was a bad boy, I knew I was not. I knew it then, and I knew it when this incident happened. But someone lost their life. Something that I regret to today, and something that has shaped and formed the way I live my life today. Because I will atone for that until the day I die. But I wound up in prison at 22 years of age with a life sentence in Pennsylvania, where life is life. And it was a different kind of advice. It's a different kind of reality for me. It reached a point where I stopped and I said, Lord, what is happening? What has happened? And my mind shot 3 or 4 years before that, where I was sitting in front of the television set with a bowl of cereal watching cartoons. And I said, that's me. That's me there. Not here. But this was real. And I had to deal with it. Some kind of way I had to deal with this, and by the grace of God, I was able to do that, because life gives you those kinds of chances. Life gives you those opportunities. Life places people in your life that are blessings. And life did that to me. Put people in my life that saw that there was something else in me, something that could be redeemed. There was value in who I was as a human being, not a devalued life based on the worst mistake I had made in my life.
When you tell the story up to this point, as you hear yourself and you hear us listening, what's that like for you after all these years of holding that day after day?
Holding? Who?
just
I
leave
don't hold. No, ma'am. I'm sorry. I have to stop you on this one.
Okay, go ahead.
What I'm doing right now at this moment, I have done for 52 years. I was serving a life sentence, and life in Pennsylvania is life until you die, but I wasn't going to die in there. I wasn't. I was confident that I was not, because I didn't deserve that. And I knew who I was as an individual, as a person. I was growing and learning every day, of course. By the grace of some universities and institutions in that particular area, we were able to get them in there. Do you mind if I jump to this?
I want you to tell that.
Okay.
Can you just finish one other thought?
Yes, ma'am.
When you said, I didn't deserve that, I just wanted you to say, what is it in you that said, I don't deserve this? I can imagine someone saying something else.
Well, as I said a little while ago, I knew who I was. And I predicate everything on the fact that I acted as a bad boy. I chose to adopt that role. But I knew it was an act. I knew it was an act. I was not a bad person. I did not want to hurt anyone intentionally. I cared about people. I felt compassionate. I loved to love as opposed to hate. I wanted to do better and to be better. So when I realized that I was sitting in the penitentiary with a life sentence, I says, I am not going to die here because I deserve better. And why did I deserve better? Because who they say I am not. That's why. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's
Okay.
powerful to hear it from you because, and we were talking earlier about the difference between being 20, because we were talking to some folks in the back, and then when you have more years, you can see some things.
Oh.
And I think it's so easy to just see only one layer of something, and you're saying, I acted like a bad boy because people told
Oh,
me
yeah.
I was a bad boy, but I knew I wasn't a bad boy, and I don't deserve to be treated like one. So there's so many layers to that I think really are
Indeed.
valuable to hear what a multiplicity we all are, how much is inside of us, and how
Yes.
seeing each of anybody in a one-dimensional way is never the truth about them.
That's true, and I see the same thing happening to. I mean, that's a product of human growth and development. The fact that I was talking to some people the other night. Well, first and foremost, I live here in State College. Thank you, Laurie. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, God. Thank you, the powers that be, the borough. And I live in a senior complex. I live amongst 18 to 20 other old timers some who have been there for 30 years, and they really didn't even know each other. And I moved there. I have a different kind of flavor. You know, I have a different slant on what life is. Probably, well, I mean, one reason why is because I've been away from quote unquote life for so long that I recognize what this is, where you guys exist. This is a phenomenal place. And what is this place? Life, existence. Wherever you're at, what town, what city, what community, just being able to take advantage of the blessings in your life is and should be a joy. I live with these old timers who very seldom, how many times did they say they had gotten together to have a party before my birthday party? Never.
0.
and some had been there 30 years. And we had a birthday party thrown by Laurie and Sam on my 75th birthday, which is August the 8th. So next August the 8th, I want somebody to remember this. And well, we threw a birthday party and invited all of the neighbors. The majority of them came. And some of them met each other for the first time. But we had a ball. There's a young fella who I met the first day I moved in my apartment, which was June the 4th last year, 2021. His name is Owen Perry. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful young man. He just turned 18, a week ago today, I believe it is. He just turned 18. He's going to be going to Penn State University. So I want you to look out for him. Owen Perry. He is a good young man. I talked to him about the prospects of adopting, he and his friends, his church members and other people, adopting some of the elders in our community, in our little village, in our little living space.
Fraternity, sorority is how I think of it.
Yeah, it's true.
It's a wild crew, y'all. You'll have to check them out sometime.
That's right. And I had a conversation at the Hub, Paul Robeson Center, Monday, I believe it was, with a group called Blueprint. Is anyone familiar with Blueprint? Okay, we have some people that are, and you should have been there. But are you graduating this year? Well, whoever is not graduating, think about Blueprint. Think about organizations and groups like that you can become a part of.
Ooh, and we're going to tell you about a couple.
And we're going to talk about another group. This is a nice segue into that.
But I also...
do we have time?
I want to make sure we have some questions or some comments from... So
how much time do we have left right now?
About 7 minutes.
7 minutes? 4 minutes? Oh, come on now.
Okay. Are you bringing the mic?
Yeah, I actually have
Go ahead.
I have a question, Irv.
Yes.
So, what was the most pivotal moment in prison in those 52 years? What was the most pivotal moment, if you could identify a pivotal one that got you right here?
Oh.
Because I also want to say one thing, that everybody I've ever met who's connected to Rockview or connected to the corrections system, right up to the lieutenant governor, has said that, okay, this guy, he needs to be out. He needs to be out doing the work like you're doing today.
The lieutenant governor at the Board of Pardons hearing where they looked at Irvin's case, that I was there for that. I had the opportunity. The lieutenant governor said that Irvin was the most exceptional and deserving candidate of commutation that he'd ever seen. So just to say his words.
So if you can answer this in 1 minute, because we have a question for you.
Yes.
That'll be the last question. What was the most...
What was the most pivotal moment? The most pivotal moment of the 52 years that I served in the penitentiary was the moment that my father and myself, we told each other that we loved each other. And I had never, not once, heard my father say that to me ever before then. And it was normal. From the brothers I talked to, your father ever tell you that? No, not really. He talks around that. He said, yeah, I'll get on that. You know I do, boy. Or something like that. Because men in this country have a tendency not to express their emotions. And my father was no different. But the moment that he told, well, of course, I pulled it out of him. I said, Dad, you know I love you, right? And I had never said it to him. He said, you just stop. I said, what? I said, you know I love you. I was grown then. I had been in the penitentiary 20 years. But we had suddenly began talking to one another as individuals, as men, as man and son. And I said, you know I love you. He says, yeah, I love you too, boy. Now, and at this time, I'm 42 years old. I love you too, boy. I said, okay, Dad. One of the most pivotal moments in my life. And that's when I knew that I could accomplish anything.
So I just wanted to ask you if you've been to Philadelphia now and how you feel about it, if it's very different or some of the issues you still see in Philadelphia.
Now, no, I have not been to Philadelphia yet. I've been out here a year, and I was required to remain in this area, or the extent was the Johnstown area and here, for at least 1 year. I went on parole Monday, which was the first time. Now I'm going to discuss moving about with my parole agent, and I should be able to visit Philadelphia, which is off the chain, young brother. We got some work to do in Philadelphia, and I know some brothers that are doing it. We're doing some work in Philadelphia and in New York and in Detroit and in Chicago and in Atlanta and in those urban areas where we have gotten silly with guns and hurting each other. So there are some things happening, and it's not all bad. And one of the good things that is happening is you guys. You guys exist. You know, I mean, I look around there, and my heart just is almost about to explode, you know, with joy and with pride, because you are going to be the leaders that's going to be out there making changes.
Okay, so could you imagine having the opportunity to going back to Laurie? Could you imagine going into Rockview Prison and sitting in a classroom, a small classroom with, 6 or 7 or 10 Penn State students and 6 or 7 or 10 incarcerated men like Irvin, and having doing a class like a sociology class or an education class or something? And of course, what you would find out, you'd be embarrassed after the first week, because you'd come to class and all the men at the prison will have done every bit of the homework and every bit of the reading,
100%.
Every single page, everything. And you will come in and not having done anything because you're a Penn State student. And then after that first week, and you're so embarrassed, and then after that, it's an amazing class. Well, you have that opportunity. And the organization that Irvin's working with here at Penn State, that's not the website you would go to apply, but after class today, I'm going to send an email out to the entire class, and you'll have a link that you could apply to do that next semester. And it's not a commitment, that you don't have to say guaranteed do it, but you can at least apply. And Irvin, could you imagine what kind of conversation you would have
I would love to see these young people do that.
And they actually go into the prison.
You would be in there. You'd be inside.
It's
first
important.
and foremost, you'd be safe. If anyone would protect you in there, it would be the guys like myself, the inmates. Make sure you got in there and got out. But what you would learn, it would transform your lives. There's some guys in there, as Laurie said, that the lieutenant governor said that, well, Mr. Moore, Irvin, is exceptional. And I hear that a lot, that I am exceptional.
Okay.
But I know I'm not.
So hang on, y'all.
we have to say
Laurie
one-
has a 30-second pitch.
30 seconds?
You're gonna help.
So anyway, hopefully some of you will apply, but Laurie and then.
So actually, Irvin's going to make the pitch, but what Irvin, what he realized in the time that we were going to Rockview with our student facilitators was how much he wanted to be part of our dialogues and World in Conversation. Thankfully, he's part of the Restorative Justice Initiative, but you have a heart for the work that we do at World in Conversation. Can you suggest to anybody, the folks in here, why they should apply to be a facilitator?
And in 20 seconds, my friend, and then we're going to do applause, and then they're going to run out of here because that's how life is.
World in Conversation. Check and see who they are. Ask people about them, investigate, and then join. It'll be the best thing you ever did in your life. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Irvin.
Hey, and if you want to come up and say hi to Fred.